Hello and welcome. This is the Carbon Watchdog podcast. This is Adam Hardy and this is the Carbon Watchdog podcast. And if you like this, then please don't forget you can go to my website and find the link to Patreon to support me. On today's podcast, I have Bremley Lyngdoh, who is he's the founder and CEO of the Worldview Impact Foundation, which is a climate change and sustainable development organization. And you're on the Initiatives of Change in Switzerland website, Bremley. That is a foundation which is essentially promoting you, okay? Or is that one that you actually work for as well?
Well, the Initiatives of Change is actually a global movement of, leaders like you and me who want to change the world. But like Mahatma Gandhi said, if you want to see the change of the world, you got to change yourself. Be the change you want to see in the world. So
right,
It's a global movement of individuals just like you and me, and it's been around since before the Second World War.
Okay.
It was started by a gentleman called Frank Bookman in the United States, and he was all about moral rearmament, MRA.
Okay. Good one. Let me finish off the intro.
Okay.
So basically, you are a climate change and sustainable development professional, and you've got lots of experience working with governments and NGOs in the private sector. And you've worked all across Asia and Africa and even South America as well. And one of the recent projects that you've been doing was in your home state, right? There's a farm that you set up, or
yes.
you have enlarged with agroecology, agroforestry, and regenerative farming.
Mm-hmm.
And now at the moment you are based in that is in. Okay, you're gonna have to tell me if I say this correctly. Meghalaya.
Correct, Meghalaya. Just like Himalaya. Meghalaya.
In northeast India, at the foothills of the Himalayas.
Correct.
And that is the bit which always really intrigued me about India's geography, because it sort of totally goes all the way around Bangladesh.
Correct.
And almost encompasses Bangladesh, but it doesn't quite reach the sea on the other side. And then, of course, there's Myanmar and the Himalayas to the north. That must be a completely different place to completely different weather. Is it wet season, dry season? Do you have seasons like that where you are?
It's we're having the retreating monsoons right now, so it's still raining, but I think it's going to stop just after the pujas are over, when the Hindu people celebrate their pujas in the last week of October, and normally the rain stops just before that, because they would then throw their gods and goddesses into the river, so they need to have dry season then. Yeah.
Okay, and how are you coping? How is your region coping with COVID-19? Are you in lockdown?
Well, as you know, we've had lockdowns here. Prime Minister Modi enforced a lockdown in April. And India is a country of 1.3 billion. So the feasibility of having a national lockdown has huge ramifications, especially for people who are so poor, who are living on a daily basis, daily wage workers, migrant workers. You must have seen in the news the exodus of them leaving the big cities and walking for miles to get back home for days with no food, no proper sanitation, no water. It's a nightmare scenario. And now India is number 2. So Trump and Modi are doing a good job. They've reached the final. So let's see who wins. It's really terrible, really speaking. But
it is.
I don't know what's going to happen with India, but it's number 2 now. And I think it's soon going to be number 1 with a population of this size.
We've got the second wave here in Europe. I think you only qualify for the second wave when you really clamp down hard with the lockdowns in the first wave. And so over the summer, it died down, and we managed to get rid of it to a large degree, but then it's just come straight back in the last couple of weeks. And we've had daily infection rates higher than ever. So we're not too happy about that here either, but let's not go into that. There's loads of stuff on on COVID-19 out there for people who are really interested in that stuff. I hope it hasn't affected you or your family at all.
No, because I'm home. I told you, Adam, that I came here in March 11th, and I was going to set the ball rolling because we were going to ride our motorcycles with 10 international riders from the UK, from the US, and Europe to go to Bhutan, to the tiger's nest, for
Right.
1,000 miles and back to raise awareness on climate change and sustainable development and work with schools and farms along the way and just engage with policymakers along the 1,000-mile track and then raise money along the way. But when Bhutan shut down its borders after one American tourist got infected, I had to abort mission, and I didn't know how long it was going to last. So my
Right.
fellow riders also had to abort mission. But
Yeah.
thankfully, no one in my family have been infected yet. But I've got friends and colleagues working in the front lines who have got COVID-19 and battling it. Yeah.
Okay, that's tough. Yeah, that's tough. Sorry about that. Okay, so basically, when I first met you, we talked a lot about Earthbanc and about the work with the mangroves and the carbon sequestration that mangroves can do. In fact, obviously, all forests and all farmlands, soil essentially can just take up so much carbon. So I wanted to go straight into that a bit, and maybe you can say how Earthbanc is doing, because it's just launched. Was it a long time in the making before you got to that stage?
Yeah, so basically I was introduced to the founders of Earthbanc, Tom Duncan and Chow Duncan from Australia when I was working in Myanmar, planting mangroves there since I've been there working on the ground since 2012 when the Burmese government or the Myanmar government opened its borders to the world. And we tested a pilot project funded by a Latin Foundation in Norway, and we planted the first 3 million trees, saplings. And then now, since we started in 2012, we've reached 17 million with return and new plantings. So it's an epic scale project. But Myanmar had suffered a major blow in 2008 when that hurricane cyclone Nargis struck them, and they lost almost 150 to 200,000 people. And it's such an irony because the poor people were chopping off the mangroves because they were dependent on charcoal and forest firewood coming from mangroves. But when a big storm hits them, they had no defense to protect themselves from Nargis. And then
So
the military government did not allow aid agencies to get in.
They had stripped the mangrove.
I've been involved.
The
they
mangroves had
cut
been
down all the
devastated.
mangroves.
Okay.
Yes,
and that's where the
completely in the
restoration work is
delta.
going on.
So that's where we started in 2012, and now we've got 17 million trees protected, as well as new planting, and the goal is to do 1 billion. So I got in touch with Tom and Chow then, who were interested to see what was going on in Myanmar. It's been 5 years before the birth of Earthbanc, and they wanted to learn more, engage. And I finally met them both at the Initiatives of Change in Switzerland in 2018 and 2019. And then we started talking about creating a sustainable financing mechanism to scale up activities rather than just depending on grants and small support from different foundations here and there. We need to have like a big platform to really scale up to 1 billion trees, or else we're never going to hit the target before it's too late. So that's where Earthbanc came in 2018 and 19, and I'm supporting them in India with a pilot project that Earthbanc has executed in the Sundarbans. The Sundarbans are the largest mangrove forest in the planet, and it's shared between India and Bangladesh. And a big cyclone hit us in May, Cyclone Amphan. Thankfully, the mangroves broke that Category 5 storm, and they were like a sponge, really. Broke it down to Category 3 and mitigated the risk from huge destruction in both India and Bangladesh. So we've just started planting 30,000 trees, but the goal is to go up to 1 million in the India side, because they're quite degraded at Bangladeshi side.
Right. Yeah, the Sundarbans is also famous for the tigers. The
swamp tigers. They live there. They're amazing.
is that a stable population now? Because I know India has been
There are 300
publicizing
Royal
this.
Bengal tigers that have basically adapted themselves to live on fish and other marine, life forms that exist in the Sundarbans. But they are there, and every year 300 people die in the Sundarbans, both on the India side and the Bangladeshi side, because they conflict between man and tiger. It's the most populated part of the world, also. These guys go in.
300.
But 300 people die every year in the Sundarbans in
Wow,
both
that's
India and
like
Bangladesh.
one for each tiger almost.
Yes, one for each tiger. So the
That's
man-eating tigers are there, but I don't blame those guys. It's their home. You go knocking around without warning, and obviously you're gonna get bitten or eaten. You're just like part of the supply chain, right? Food chain, sorry.
how
So
on earth do you manage to get local support when so many people are getting killed? Can you imagine in Europe?
well, they're very
Can you imagine in Europe
yeah,
with
they're very
wolves and bears, they just go out and shoot them? Even
yeah.
though bears are
Well,
protected,
they
right? There
cannot
was
shoot.
one in
You
Germany.
can't shoot tigers in India. It's against the law to kill tigers. You go to jail. So we have to create a buffer for reducing the conflict between man and tiger, because they are encroaching into tiger territory. It's supposed to be a national sanctuary. It was a national park. So people are going there to chop trees illegally. So the tigers are the protectors and the caretakers of the forest. They'll eat you because you're not supposed to cut trees and venture into their territory in the first place. So I don't blame the tigers. It's
Wow, that's
men.
really
It's
harsh.
man who's at fault.
Okay, yeah, definitely. But people have still got to live, right? If that happened in
Yeah.
Britain or in Germany, in fact, it did happen in Germany, that one of the bears from a national park in the Alps, I think it was in Poland or in Czechoslovakia, or sorry, the Czech Republic, one of the bears went roaming and came into Germany. And of course, you're not allowed to shoot bears in Germany. Even though there are no bears, you're still not allowed to shoot them because they're an endangered species. And so there was this massive, massive outcry. And the politicians just said, okay, we'll let you shoot this one because it's a special case. And there was like, great, they all grabbed their guns and they went out hunting. And of course, within 24 hours, it was dead. There
Oh God.
was no way that, and that was because it was just there. It hadn't even killed anybody. It hadn't even killed any sheep or any goats or anything. Nothing. It
Yeah.
had done nothing. And
Well, you can imagine back in the days during the British Empire, there were like 50,000 tigers roaming around in India and Bangladesh. And then, we've got man-eating tigers. Then they had like a bounty for,
yeah,
hunters. Like, we had Jim Corbett. That's why we have a Jim Corbett National Park here for Tiger Reserve also. So he shot a few of these tigers. Back then, there were so many.
yeah.
But now they are endangered species, so they
Mhm.
need to be protected. And there are 7 subspecies of tigers, and I think 3 are gone, extinct anyway. So there's just
Yeah.
a few left, like the Siberian, the Royal
Mhm.
Bengal, and 2 others, sadly. So what needs to happen is livelihoods need to be created for these people living at risk in the delta, not to chop down mangroves. They need to be paid to restore mangroves. That's why this is
Yeah.
so much more important. We need to have rangers in the ground to be fully employed, so there's no trafficking of tigers. Some people also want to kill tigers to sell to the Chinese markets. So,
Yeah.
that's not good. So
Mhm.
they die because of that, because they're so poor. They try to risk their lives to get tiger parts and sell it for aphrodisiac or whatever to China, and then they get killed. So, we have to address
Right.
the trafficking issue from the core of the market for tiger parts, just like elephant tusk. This is a huge issue.
Yeah, it does look like there's some small sort of acceptance now that maybe this Chinese medicine that's based on animal parts isn't so real, and the myth is slowly being torn down in China and Vietnam and all those places where they use these medicines, so-called medicines. Yeah, it's not good. Well, but to get back to Earthbanc again, so you're starting to funnel private funds through Earthbanc to support planting
In
up of
India.
mangroves in the Sundarbans
In
and
India.
in Bangladesh as well.
Mhm. Just started in India first because they are more degraded than Bangladesh. And then hopefully we'll scale up to 10 million. and then maybe move to Bangladesh also. But what Earthbanc has done is they've developed their own matrix, and with the partnership with the European Space Agency, they can use real-time satellite data to monitor the degradation of mangroves or the restoration of mangroves or how well it's working, and also measure the carbon stocks from space with high resolution satellite data, and also use drones to monitor real time from just 2 meters or 10 meters above the mangrove forest. So this is happening right now as we speak. Even though it's COVID-19, the local guys on the ground are busy mapping and planting in West Bengal, in the Sundarbans,
Okay.
where the cyclone hit in May.
So how does it work with the satellite imagery? Who actually does that? I can see that when you want to invest your money in something like Earthbanc, you want to, it's going to create mangroves. Mangroves are going to absorb tons of CO2.
Yep.
So how does that work? Do people then get do the investors then get certificates that they can use, kind of carbon offsets or carbon credits?
So basically, it's not meant for outside people. It's just meant for you and me. So for example, if you and me had a Revolut account, so imagine Revolut becoming a green bank with its own projects around the world. That's what Earthbanc is all about. So let's say Adam and Bremley, we have a savings account in the UK linked to Earthbanc with 200 quid, okay? 200 pounds, me and you. Yeah. So what Earthbanc does, because we are the members of Earthbanc, we have a savings Earth Saver account. They would use my 200 quid and your 200 quid and invest in a microfinance institution in India that would normally borrow at 25% interest from Indian banks. They would use my money and your money to give, 15% or 12%, beat the interest rate in India. And then from the 15% that those microfinance people, women and men who plant trees, who run business in India, we would get 6% for a return every year, and the Earthbanc would get like half. And then the women also and the men also win because they don't have to borrow at 25%, but at 15 or less. So that's how our Earth Saver individual account for individual members will grow, because we get to do peer-to-peer lending to real farmers in developing countries that need the money, can borrow at a cheaper rate. So we get to work our money from the bank to plant trees or, grow food or land restoration, regeneration, or arts and crafts and handlooms, whatever they are working on. And then the return comes back to our savings account. That's how it works.
Okay, so how does who looks at all of the satellite images, and who goes out and says, well, look, that was really good over there. You've got some great mangroves.
That is being done by the team from Sweden.
Yeah.
It's a thing because Earthbanc is based in Sweden. It's incubated with Climate Kick there in Sweden, and also the European Space Agency business team is working with the Swedish team and the Danish team that are the GIS, the spatial types of experts based out of Sweden and Denmark. They do all the zooming from space. And then we've got the local teams working in India that are on the ground, doing the ground truthing and supplying all the real-time data from the field every day.
Okay, so do you have to enforce it? Do you have to, have you had any cases yet where you had to go out and go, look, you've got your loan, but what are you doing with it? You've gone out and bought a car or something.
Basically, we have to work with existing microfinance institution in India, which we do. So the one that we work in India has 25,000 men and women who are actually the beneficiaries of our money, so to say. And they are the ones planting the trees. But apart from just planting trees, they also got their own little, handloom, handicraft business, or their little shops and, whatever in the local villages. And they need this money to expand. And the microfinance institution in India is legally responsible to do all the follow-up with them. What Earthbanc does is provides the platform for them to do digital banking on their phones or apps or whatever they have. And it gives that platform also to the microfinance institution in India so they can manage all their borrowers properly.
Right.
and they can see everything online
Yeah.
on their phones. And then we give them the money to the microfinance institution that's been running for the last 30 years. So they have a track record of who borrows and who pays back. Mostly women always pay back. So it's a
Hmm.
good track record. So we don't deal with the operations on the ground. The local partners do everything.
Excellent. That sounds really good. It's really
Yeah,
impressive. And
yeah.
so, do you see lots of problems with? I mean, Bangladesh. Okay, you haven't quite started in Bangladesh yet, but it
Not started there yet.
sounds like a disaster area with all of this, with the
Yes.
environmental problems. Weren't they? They were totally flooded. I think the Bangladeshi Prime Minister said that her country was half of it was underwater for the last 6 weeks.
Yes. Correct. Correct.
Does that wipe out a lot of
But
what you
I
do?
mentioned to you, Adam, since I beg your pardon.
I was just saying, does that wipe out? Does that wipe just totally wipe people out? People, you've got people on the in this microfinance initiative, and they're running their small holdings and their farm, and they're planting up trees and stuff, and then they have to leave. They just have. How can you survive there when you're underwater for 6 weeks or whatever it was?
Yeah, in about 10 years' time, sea level will rise, whether we like it or not. So mangroves are the only defense and the only way to slow down the rise and protect people from tides coming in, from storms, from hurricanes, from floods. So if we want to save lives, mangroves are the best strategy right now for both India, Bangladesh, Myanmar, all the low-lying areas where mangroves have been degraded. But at the same time, Adam, since I got here, I was going to go to Bhutan. So I've
Yeah.
been working at also highland ecosystems to prevent huge topsoil runoff and flash floods from the mountains when it rains so much. As I
Right.
told you, in Assam, we lost like 300 people this monsoon season because of flash floods. That's just getting worse every year. But the main contributor is silt deposits in the Brahmaputra Valley and the river. It's lifted the riverbed by 1 to 2 meters. So you can imagine the water would burst out of the banks and flood everything. And in
Just from
doing
soil
so,
erosion.
all the wildlife, Royal Bengal tigers, elephants, rhinos, deer, they all drown, and we lose so much every year, let alone all of the paddy fields get contaminated and people get carried away and washed out. So what we're doing with Earthbanc is also restore highland cloud forests in the Himalayan foothills to prevent topsoil runoff and create some kind of rainwater retention in the highlands to reduce the speed of the flood waters going down and flooding everything downstream. So it's just important to do this also in the mountains because, as you know, the glaciers are melting at a rapid speed, and the Himalayas
Right.
are the third largest concentration of fresh water on the planet after the Arctic and the Antarctic. But not much is being talked about it. But if Everest or the entire Himalayas were to dry up, India and Bangladesh and Pakistan with 2 billion people, will suffer the most. It'd be like a desert, really. So we need to also work in the highlands, and that's what we're doing right now.
Right. That's pretty amazing. That's quite a comprehensive sort of integrated approach. That's really good.
Source to sea.
Yeah.
Source to sea.
Okay.
From the Himalayas to the Indian Ocean. Yeah.
Uh-huh. The I wonder if it'd be a good point to start talking about the stuff that I've been looking at with the idea of a carbon currency backed by carbon rationing, where you take a country, for instance, anywhere maybe, but you give every citizen their carbon rations, and you use that as a currency and denominated in kilos and grams of carbon, and you make the whole supply chain all the way down from the consumers, from the citizens who've got their carbon rations. You make the whole supply chain deal with that currency, so that nobody can sell anything without demanding currency for it, without demanding carbon currency for it alongside the normal currency. And that goes back to the fossil fuel suppliers who have to collect the carbon rations as proof of what they've was proof that they are that's the license that they have for digging this stuff or pumping this stuff out of the ground. So you know immediately from the start, whatever rations you give out, then that is the limit of the amount that can be pumped out of the ground by the fossil fuel companies. Now, where that comes in to your story is that if there's a central bank giving out carbon rations to people, then essentially you are controlling the CO2 emissions completely. And what you can also do is let people earn those rations, earn that carbon currency, if they can prove that they are sequestering the CO2 out of the atmosphere. So if you plant a bunch of mangroves and you've proved with your satellite imagery that you have got that you've sequestered 100 tons of CO2, then you can go to the central carbon bank and say, okay, I'll have my carbon rations. And then because there'll be because people will be able to do personal carbon trading to, if they for whatever reason, if they're just rich and they just have that lifestyle, or if they just for whatever reason need more carbon rations, then they have to buy them, and people have to sell them for them to be able to buy them. So there'll be supply and demand there. And obviously, if the supply of rations goes down, because we're trying to reduce the amount of fossil fuels that are pumped out of the ground, then the price of the carbon currency will go up. And that means that if your people are planting mangroves and doing lots of CO2 sequestration and earning these rations from the central carbon bank, then that is, to me, that is a much better way of funding the whole thing, because you have a direct line between the CO2 emissions and the people who are actually doing the work on the ground, planting the mangroves or whatever it is, doing farming that regenerative farming that builds up the CO2 in the soil or whatever. And that would make a much more robust, I think much more credible investment strategy, not investment strategy, but a whole economy, much more credible economy than the whole of the offsetting business that we have at the moment. And the whole of the a lot of stuff like Earthbanc, what Earthbanc is doing is relying on people going, oh hell, the climate's going to hell, we've got to do something about this, I'm going to invest my money with Earthbanc. So you're just relying on people's goodwill essentially. And with carbon credits and carbon offsetting, there's just all sorts of things going on that you can't really tell whether the offsetting is really valid. And so this whole concept makes it a much more robust and traceable approach to the carbon sequestration and the carbon capture that we're going to have to do if we want to keep below 2 degrees C global warming, let alone 1.5 degrees C that's in the Paris Agreement. So have you thought that, while I was telling you that, did you think you can see how a national framework like that would fit in with what Earthbanc is doing?
You know what, Adam? I'm actually I totally agree with you. And I've been trying to push the government of India to integrate national capital accounting into the measurement of the GDP. You know, as I mentioned to you earlier in our conversation, I studied at Columbia and I took classes from Joseph Stiglitz, who was a chief economist of the World Bank and also got a Nobel Prize in economics. You know, he said,
right,
guys, the way the world has been measuring GDP is completely flawed and wrong, because they never accounted for natural capital, human capital, intellectual capital, social capital, nothing. It's all based on pure exponential growth and oil and ripping off the planet. And they don't account for this. So imagine in India, if we have a market with the Reserve Bank of India, where we go beyond carbon and look at nature-based solutions and natural capital accounting. So Maharashtra, which is the biggest state with all the biggest industry, chopped off all its forests, huge population, huge ecological footprint. then they would pay my state, Meghalaya, which
Right.
still has standing forest, lesser population, beautiful scenery, and a lush green forest with waterfalls and all organic farms.
Uh-huh.
But people are poor. So a state within India, 29 states, they can trade their national capital assets. You know, Maharashtra has less, it's destroyed, but it's very rich. It's heavily industrialized, polluting a
Right.
lot, chopping off mangroves. They can pay a smaller state within the union, say, hey guys, please protect your forests and your aquifers because we need you. Your value is like $1 billion, and we have destroyed $1 billion worth of ecosystem services. We'll pay you $1 billion to maintain your forest and green jobs for your young people, create the organic food for our farmers because we have contaminated our soil with chemicals and pesticides, and we're all getting cancer. And the public health cost is like another billion. So you grow your organic food, we'll buy it from you. I will invest in your state to protect your forest because your ecosystem services are worth like $1 billion a year or something like that. So if this happens at a national level with this kind of framework
Right.
under the Reserve Bank of India, it would work. You know,
Uh-huh.
in a big country like India, then the United States can do that. The European Union can do that in this post-COVID-19 recovery that we're talking about. So I think we need to
Yeah.
move beyond carbon and look at total ecosystem functionalities and measure everything in a matrix. For example, 1 hectare of mangroves in Myanmar, we
Yeah.
plant 2,500 trees, right? The total economic benefits of 1 hectare of mangroves, which means 2,500 trees, is $200,000 per hectare per year. That equates to $100 per tree per year of total benefits. And carbon is
Right.
minuscule, it's part of it, but it's minuscule. It's all about oxygen production, water vapor production, regulation of the tide, uh, flood
Right.
defense from storms and hurricanes, fish stocks, rejuvenating the fish yield to 50%,
Uh-huh.
medicinal herbs and plants, ecological social tourism, and many more. You add that up, it's 200 grand a year per hectare. It's
Right.
like $100 per tree per year. You know, it's like a lot. So how do we account for that? So we need to put
Exactly.
that into the national budget of a country, and then states that pollute need to pay to restore. So we need to move way beyond carbon. It's too cheap to just talk about carbon,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think. So we need to put a value of the entire functional ecosystem and the entire life supporting ecosystem. And the people who maintain the integrity of those ecosystems, they need to be paid. Exactly what you said.
I think you're completely right that we do need to move beyond carbon because we've got to have a completely circular economy, and that is including, well, donut economics. That includes all of the ecological services. But right now, in this emergency, in this situation where we've got such little time to wind down the fossil fuel industry and completely replace it, that is the reason why that's why I'm saying carbon currency. It's got to be carbon because people know that there's climate change. Nobody really significantly says, no, there's not climate change anymore, apart from one guy in the White House, but hopefully he won't be there much longer. But essentially, if we go for a carbon currency, then that brings a robustness to the whole system, and it imposes a framework. What I'm afraid of is that, well, we've been saying these things about ecosystem services for a long, long time, and it just gets ignored completely by political leaders and in society. And what happens is that even if you had some political leaders who go in there and they put some good policies in place, they're not necessarily going to stay there with a change of government. This new government's going to come in, and look what Trump did. He just unwound a lot of the legislation that Obama put in. Now, I think that what can happen with a carbon currency is that finally, you have then broken the stranglehold that capitalism has over the economy, because you have then put a second currency in place, which is controlled by society. At the moment, you have money, and money in most cases is controlled by the free market of people buying and selling, and it goes up or down or whatever. And sometimes the government will step in and go, hey, you're not allowed to do that. That's a monopoly. We're not having that because that's bad for society. Now, in how many years, how many decades, centuries have we had money for? And we've only just got we've only just got this rather weak level of legislation that's stopping the abuse of the abuse of all of the environmental and ecological services, and the tragedy of the commons. Everything that is not nailed down, everything that has not got a price on its head, is just totally abused. So the carbon currency, well, looks at the future, assuming you impose a carbon currency and we get to the point where we see, okay, the job is being taken care of now. We are winding down fossil fuels. And my theory is that you can start using the carbon currency to start denominating other things in other ecological services. I mean, like,
Yes, I agree
I don't
with
know
you
how that would
completely.
work, and that's really blue sky thinking, but that is
Yeah.
what I say when people say, no, you've got to look beyond carbon. But basically, the reason why you want to concentrate on carbon is because the climate change crisis is something that is in everybody's faces right now.
Right
And
now. Yeah, people know.
as soon as we've got that and we're dealing with it, then we can start going, okay, now what about all of the other things?
What about all the services? Correct.
Yeah.
Because there's no other market. There's no oxygen market. Well, there is oxygen market. We buy it in tanks. We go down. People take oxygen when they get COVID, and people drink water and they buy water. But there's no true global market. Like we're talking like a carbon market where you do offsets and all that. So I totally agree with you. We need one step at a time to make the system work, and then we can add on all the other services and like top up, top up. But like I told you earlier, Adam, we need to pick one country, the highest risk on the planet from climate change, and get them to adopt what we've just said. Remember, like Mauritius or something, or Tuvalu or some small island where it's easier to work with, or somewhere in the Caribbean that are like sinking off, and then execute this, make it work, test a model, and then get other, like the CARICOM, the whole Caribbean islands come together, and they like shouting, nobody cares about us or the Pacific Islanders. We target them, and it's a no-brainer for them if it works for them in that small island, because they have to buy insurance from big companies to insure themselves. Oh my God, it's crazy. First of all, they never committed that crime. Second of all, they're paying for everything, and they are the highest risk, and they're paying the biggest price for big guys like China and the United States and Europe polluting far away, and these guys, little islands, are drowning, and they have to pay like huge costs to pay for their insurances. So maybe we can approach them, their ministers or their heads of states and government, and say, hey guys, we want to help you out. Can we prototype this model that we're working on, and you lead it and expand across the islands? And then they put pressure on the bigger fish, and they move from there. But it has to be a people's movement, like a bottom up,
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm setting up a group in North London to approach this. I'm talking to a lot of people who live around here who are involved with all sorts of things to do with air quality and climate change and the council. And
I highly suggest, Adam, that reach out to the high commissioners of CARICOM, the Caribbean Islands, or even the Pacific Islanders. They're all there in London. They're sitting in their embassies or their high commission. Why don't you reach out to them and say, hey guys, or the Commonwealth countries to start with in the Commonwealth, because it'd be good to reach out to the Commonwealth Secretariat. They've got their climate team, and they're sitting there, and then approach them. I can link you up with them, and then say, can we test with a few little small island developing states, and we move forward. Just go and chat with the high commissioners and present your model, and say we're doing it in North London. Maybe we can twin North London with Trinidad, Tobago, or Jamaica, or something like that.
Oh, they'd love that. They'd love that. Definitely.
Yeah. Why not? Or just talk to the Jamaicans in London, all of them. I don't know. Maybe they want to do something for their motherland.
That's a fantastic idea.
All the diaspora from all the Caribbean islands. There's all these young people living in London who want to give back to their homes. They want to engage, because they all send remittance back home. Whatever money they earn from living in Europe, in the US, in the UK, they send money home to help their farms. And maybe they want to do more.
That's right. I'm sure they would. I've got to. It's the young kids as well that I've got to talk to. There's the youth parliament.
But all those young people and students from the Caribbean in UK universities right now, in lockdown and worried about their future and their homes, maybe you can test the water with them, because they belong somewhere. It's that sense of belonging to an island that's thinking, what do you want to do for your future? What's
Right.
your stake? You know, yeah, that
Right.
call to action has to come out, and then they take responsibility and take ownership of the process. And before, lo and behold, before you know it, it just sets out like fire. It spreads all across the Caribbean because they love it. So you make them own it, and you give them like an assignment, like a
Uh-huh.
mission to do it for their islands.
Good plan. I like it.
Yeah,
Definitely.
go start right away.
Okay. Um, you mentioned actually before that you were involved with, you're getting involved with some nuclear stuff, with some, is it protests, or are you doing a I read an
This
article
is
you sent about in
yeah.
Meghalaya state, where they've had some old uranium mines, and there's some big problems with
Yes.
the residue from the mines. What have you been
Yes.
doing there?
So basically, this uranium mining saga goes back to the 1950s when Meghalaya wasn't even around. It was, just after India's independence and so on and so forth. The Atomic Minerals Division Directorate of India was hovering around in our neck of the woods during the Assam days. We were part of the big state of Assam where you drink Lipton tea and, all comes from Assam. It's the biggest tea
Okay.
gardens on the
Yeah.
planet here.
Right.
Then we got our hill state, which my father was involved in this hill state movement to separate the hill people from the plains of Assam in the 60s. And we finally got our hill state in 1972 after having an autonomous state from 1970 to 72. But then they started mining, even during the Assam days, they were excavating, finding stuff, and they started mining operations in the early 70s, 80s, and 90s, the Atomic Minerals Division, and they found high-grade uranium here. And as you know, India tested its first nuclear weapon in 1974 during the prime ministership of Indira Gandhi. It's quite an irony, the land of Gandhi, the land of non-violence with
Yeah.
weapons of mass destruction. And now even Pakistan has them and so on and so
Yeah.
forth. But it's like this new arms race going on, right?
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, India's got a nuclear program for generating nuclear energy, and it's signed bilateral agreements for
Yeah.
nuclear fuel from the United States and Canada, and maybe Australia will do too.
Okay.
But India also has got a military program. So no way the United States or Canada or Australia is going to send uranium fuel to India's military reactors, for
Okay.
plutonium enrichment for weapons grade. So where else is the uranium going to come from? It has to be from domestic sources, right? And we have high grade here. So this is this classic Avatar story, if you remember, the Navi people, those blue guys, and we are the
Yeah.
Khasi people, and they were looking for unobtainium in the planet Pandora. So we are like classic Pandora here, and we have uranium.
Yeah.
So obviously those guys have mined uranium, experimental mining back in the 80s and 90s, and then
Uh-huh.
my granduncle, who was the chief minister then of my state, shut down the mine, said like, this is not working, guys. It's
Okay.
contaminating our ecosystems, our water, our air. We need to shut it down. So he
Yeah.
just asked the Atomic Minerals Division to shut it down, and then they left, but they just dumped everything, all the radioactive stuff lying around with all their gear, and he
But they
asked
didn't
them to
clean
come
up.
back, and then these big concrete tanks were built in the 1990s
Yeah.
with all this uranium ore and the decay that was dug out of the earth in the 80s was locked down in these concrete tanks built in the late 90s to seal everything. And
Okay.
obviously, with the wear and tear over 30 years, these tanks have started to crack. Some of them have got holes, and there's leakage going on straight into our rivers and waters and air, and the villages around that area that are having kids with deformities and people dying of cancer and fish dying in the rivers and
Yeah.
livestock dying and everything. So I've been documenting this for the last 30 odd years because I care about these issues,
Right.
because I was doing research on forest there and I found this out, and now they're leaking. So I'm actually going back there tomorrow to go and
Yeah.
check on them, and I'll report back to you on what I find out.
Ah, that's a nightmare. There can't be.
It is.
What's the chance of getting the government to actually spend a lot of money on sorting it out? Because it will take a lot of money to sort something like that out.
The government is in denial, Adam, to be frank with you. They said everything is okay, it's all right. They sent their people there, but I don't think they went deep enough into the forest because everything is covered with bush right now. And there's
Okay.
lots of erosion going on. We have the highest rainfall on the planet in my part of the world, 50 feet, 25 meters a year of torrential rain for 6 months, and nothing's going to stand
Well,
against that, right? And
no.
there's erosion going on, and there's wind. So no concrete's going to hold that long. So they need to be sealed. They need to be taken care of, and
Yeah.
radioactive materials need to be properly guarded and taken care of. And also radiation needs to be monitored with some Geiger counter provided for the community so they don't go venturing around there because they don't know. They're just, uneducated farmers. And I fear that they're being contaminated and they're slowly dying of cancer and their population are getting infected and they're having all these deformities into their households and families. It's totally
Ah,
unfair.
yeah. No, that's really tough. That's really bad news.
Yeah, and there's also radon gas coming out from those
Yeah.
ventilating pipes from each dam, because every dam has got to have pipes for
Right.
all that decaying uranium stuff coming out. And if you seal it, it'll blow up, right? So all that
Okay.
radon gas also it's light, it gets carried away in the wind, and whoever inhales those particles will have lung cancer over time.
Well, I hope you get somewhere with it. Hope it slowly
Yes, I'm
builds up.
working on it, Adam. I'm working on it.
Okay, good luck with that. Good luck with that. It's terrible. Okay, well, that's great to be able to discuss all this different stuff with you. I think
Yes, Adam, I'm a big proponent of clean energy. I'm not talking about big dams everywhere, like the Three Gorges Dam, flooding so much land and creating earthquakes and, taking over land of poor farmers. I'm talking about decentralized grids,
right.
Wind, solar, micro hydro, where we can train young people living in those communities to be renewable energy entrepreneurs, powering their own communities, literally, power
Right.
the people. Why not?
Full
Why do
scale.
we have to go to central grid and build nuclear plants everywhere and be easy targets of terrorists and whatnot and mine uranium, whether it's for military or civilian purpose? We need to switch to more clean, renewable energies beyond
Right.
oil, beyond coal. And we can do these from micro hydro without disturbing the flow of the waterfalls,
Right.
from a lot of waste from,
Okay.
that's created, biological waste from the sun and from the wind, and also from the waves. And also
Right.
we've got lots of hot springs where we can tap the geysers and create geothermal energies and really create green
Yeah.
jobs for local communities, local heroes on the ground.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it sounds like with 25 meters of rain every year, then the potential for micro hydro must be huge.
Yes, thundering waterfalls everywhere. Huge, 1 billion liters of water just going down the drain to Bangladesh and Assam. The rest of India is like running out of water.
Yeah. I'd love to be
We've
able to
got,
visit. Love to be
yeah,
able
you
to
must
visit there
come.
one day.
David Attenborough just did a story on our living root bridges because our ancestors, thousands of years ago, were building these ancient living root bridges that are still growing. And I still have our ancient sacred forest, which is more than 1,000 years old and is still growing. You must
Okay.
come and see how we need to restore and protect our ecosystems because our ancestors did that. And we have monolithic cultures. So we have got monoliths everywhere, just like, Stonehenge. We've got our own miniature virgin here. And we're the only tribe in this part of the world that still have monolith cultures and still put those big stones around.
All right.
So
Okay.
we still have the ancient ways of the ancestors, and we need to maintain that.
I've seen those living root bridges. They
Correct.
look like something out of a fantasy film.
Avatar. Again, like Avatar, Pandora. Yeah. That's what I'm saying.
That's brilliant. And you've got the Himalayas. Are they? Can you see?
We are on the foothills. We are on the foothills.
Okay.
And then we've got the Brahmaputra Valley that I talked to you about, with the big Brahmaputra rivers flowing from the Chinese border and the Tibet, and then the Himalayas go up through Bhutan and Upper Assam and Northeast India. They go way up.
Right.
Like a shield.
It sounds like a paradise, though, and we've got a lot of work to do to make sure we don't lose it.
Yes,
it's
I
really
hope you can come here and we can work together and test and prototype your model. Really fun.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. Okay, Bremley, thank
And
you very
also we
much.
can work with all our farmers to produce all this organic regenerative food that we're all talking about, and restore soil so that they start sequestering carbon again. You know, it's not just forests, but also soils,
Right.
like what the people at Kiss the Ground have been promoting to their film, and Regeneration International, you know, the
Yeah,
4 for
that's
1000. 4
slowly
for
coming
1000.
out into
Yeah.
public knowledge that
So
the
we
soil is so
shift our
important.
economies from extractive economies to regenerative economies, you know, as part of the green recovery. That's the only way, only hope, Adam.
That's right.
We
Okay,
need to
Bromley.
change our food system. We need to change our food systems.
We do definitely in the UK as well, everywhere.
Yes, we need rewilding in the UK too to prevent floods. You know, we're having floods a lot.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Okay, Bromley,
Great.
thank you very much, and we'll speak to you again soon. Thank you very much for being on here, and
Yeah.
good luck with all of the things that you're doing, and
Yeah.
hope to hear about Earthbanc soon as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
May the forest of the tide be with you always. You know what I'm referring to, the forest of the tide, right? Take care.
And with you. Bye.
Be safe.
Thank you very
Yeah.
much. My name is Adam Hardy, and this is the Carbon Watchdog podcast. All of the website content and the podcasts are free. If you like what Carbon Watchdog is doing, then please head over to patreon.com using the link on the website and support me there. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope you'll tune into the next one. Bye.